All right. So today we're back having some fun with some random movie rankings, but today we are doing the genre of thriller. This one should be interesting because I feel like thriller is a genre that really stretches itself, so I feel like we'll get a lot of different types of movies, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, we're going to be starting with RoboCop, and I'll go ahead and throw it over to you to get us started.
Yeah, thriller will definitely be interesting because you can really have everything from like a psychological thriller to a straightforward horror movie to action that I feel like really fits in this. So it should be interesting. Um, the original RoboCop, I've seen it only once. Um, it I appreciate a lot of the Verhoevenisms that are in it that are present if you've seen some of his other movies like Starship Troopers or Total Recall, where it's really, hitting hard on like critiquing like, capitalism and corporatism, especially in this movie, the corporatism and how that leads to like dystopias. But yeah, I've seen this one time. It didn't leave too much of an impression on me. Um, I remember definitely liking it and appreciating the commentary that Verhoeven provides, and of course, it being a Verhoeven movie, it's extremely graphic, and so this has some sequences that are also extremely graphic, and so of course fun to watch for the carnage candy. Um, and it has that just Verhoeven where uh, it just doesn't. It's not that it doesn't take itself seriously necessarily, but a lot of things are played very ironically or to be somewhat satirical. So there's moments that are just like absurdly funny to like make a point, and I appreciate that a lot about Verhoeven. And there's a lot of that in this movie. I think it has a cool lore. I think it has a cool universe. I haven't checked out. I've heard the second one is okay, and then the third one's pretty bad. And I've heard some mixed things about the reboot. But just given how I feel about reboots, I feel like I would be the one people to actually like it. But yeah, as far as this first one, I'd say it's solid. It's definitely not up there with like Terminator, in my opinion. I don't know anyone that would really put it up there with Terminator. Maybe there's a few people, but yeah, I'd say it's pretty solid. A little like dystopian, gritty sci-fi thriller, but nothing I would like run to or like immediately think of if I was thinking of the genre.
Yeah, that's completely fair. It's interesting because I think you would put this in like the classic 80s action movie area, like when you're thinking about the movies that like defined the 80s, so to speak, like RoboCop comes up. However, to your point, I don't know if I ever see people put it above like a Rambo or a Terminator or a Predator or whatever they're talking about. Die Hard. And so it is kind of interesting. This is one that I watched much later in life when, as you know, I'm a huge 80s action fan, but even I was late to the RoboCop party. And from what I could gather, while it did relatively okay when it first came out, it's almost been so forgotten about that it's become like a cult classic, if that makes sense. To the point where there was a video game that just came out like 3 or 4 months ago, and it's been killing it. Like, apparently, it's a really good game. It really makes you feel like RoboCop. And then people are going back and watching the original movie, and it's almost had like a renaissance, which is kind of cool. As far as my personal take, I liked it. To your point, I don't know if I would put it above some of the other 80s action movies that I really like, but it did come out in 1987, which, as we know, is like one of the best years for action movies. And so, it's got that going for it. But this is one where I have not seen the sequels. As you know, normally I go the whole way through, but I have not seen RoboCop 2 or 3. So, yeah, at least with the first one, it's definitely got a lot to like about it. It's just one of those fun movies. And so, yeah, I think I would pretty much tend to agree with you. I did not know that the guy who did Starship Troopers is who did this. Growing up, Starship Troopers is one of my favorite movies, so that's kind of cool. So, yeah, now I have a little bit of a greater appreciation for it.
There you go. And there was time, Neil Blomkamp just likes to sign on to projects and then just never do them, or they just get taken from him. And he was for a long time talking about how he was going to write and direct a RoboCop reboot for Amazon because RoboCop's MGM and Amazon owns MGM. And I think he'd be someone that'd be perfect for that. I mean, his whole aesthetic was gritty sci-fi dystopian. and critiquing, like capitalism and corporatism. So he's very much like a modern Verhoeven in that aspect. But it kind of fell through the cracks, and it looks like he's doing some more mainstream movies now with like Gran Turismo. But I felt like that was one instance where I feel like Neil Blomkamp would have done a great job.
Yeah, that is interesting. I can kind of speak on the reboot, and it's not one of my favorites as far as reboots go, or I guess remake. But yeah, I don't know. That one to me is relatively forgettable. It falls into the realm of they literally just do the original movie but with modern graphics. So it depend like since I would assume you don't hold the original RoboCop as like one of your favorites of all time, the second one may just feel like you're rehashing the original and like you might as well just watch originals. I don't know, but it's not like they necessarily do anything new or they add any sort of fun twist, if that makes sense.
At some point, I'm sure I'll probably watch the franchise through if they ever decide to make a new one.
Like the next one, I definitely know you've seen. It's Olympus Has Fallen.
Ooh, I love Olympus Has Fallen. Um, so I think we did a video on like defending bad movie. I forgot the specific title. Um, I talked about White House Down being one of my like movies that I defend that I think are great and I love watching. Olympus Has Fallen is one of those famous instances where two identical movies came out in the same year, and so Olympus Has Fallen is essentially White House Down. And I do prefer White House Down, but I also really do like Olympus Has Fallen. Um, yeah, like I said, it is slightly inferior, but it's still got great action. It's just, political what if nonsense, and just nonsensical action. Very much just like a turn your brain off and enjoy, have a good time, hear Gerard Butler say some one liners and be clearly Scottish, but somehow like a US military veteran and Secret Service agent. And I like the franchise that it spawned. I like London Has Fallen's the weakest, but I did like Angel Has Fallen quite a bit. And there's supposedly a fourth one in development called Night Has Fallen, but that got announced after Angel Has Fallen in 2019, and it's 5 years later, and we haven't heard anything. So who knows if that's happening? But the original Olympus Has Fallen, I think, is my favorite of the trilogy. But it's one of my favorite, like more modern action trilogies, like a guilty pleasure.
So this is going to be weird, but I guess I would have to say I completely disagree with you. And what I mean by that is, so I haven't rewatched them, so it's kind of going off of that like original way I felt watching the movies. I absolutely love Olympus Has Fallen. To your point, I think it's one of the better modern action movies, and the trilogy as a whole, I would say I put up there. But for me, I do a switch. I thought London Has Fallen was amazing, and I thought Angel Has Fallen was pretty weak. And I ended up looking into it. Angel Has Fallen had so many issues with the production that it was just completely jumbled together. It was basically like Zack Snyder's Justice League, where they had one person doing it, then he had to leave, then another guy came in, then they did reshoots, and you can tell the tone is off. And they had issues with different actors and whatnot. And so it was like really weird for me, at least, to watch Angel Has Fallen. But at least the first two I hold in very high regards. Maybe on a rewatch, I would be more at your level, but from what I remember, I absolutely love these. I ended up, ironically, I watched London Has Fallen on a plane. It was one of those plane movies. So, like, considering how you know exactly what happens in the movie, it's weird to watch it on a plane. But
Yeah, a little uncomfortable.
um, for me personally, from what I remember, of course, like I said, haven't rewatched these, so maybe it would change. But from what I remember, I hold these in very high regard. I really love the first one, and I remember really liking the second one.
Just like it's like cheesy fan fiction of just like reality, and they're just a good time.
And in your defense, I was such a truther for Olympus Has Fallen. I never watched White House Down. I was mad at it.
The White House Down, I will say, is better, but I still they're very, very comparable for obvious reasons. But I think White House Down edges it out just a little bit.
It's Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
James Woods is
So
also in it.
maybe I need to watch it, but from a non from a non-believer's perspective.
I know
Um,
what you mean.
So the next one is Message from the King. Have you seen that one? It's Chadwick Boseman. It was a Netflix original, like right after Black Panther.
Interesting.
Actually, I'm looking at the years. It looks like it was right before Black Panther.
Okay. Before he really, well, he'd been in Civil War, so I guess his name was on the map.
Yeah. My apologies. Right after Black Panther was that 21 Bridges. So the other Netflix original.
21 Bridges. Yeah, that was very much a forgettable movie. I know that's
Message
not on
from
our
the
list, but
to be fair, Message from the King was as well. Like I remember being super excited for it and then having it be a huge letdown, but I didn't know if you had seen it. Are you looking into it to see if you remember this?
which one?
Message from the King.
Oh, I said I hadn't seen it.
Oh, my apologies. I missed that. That's why I was holding off. Okay.
No,
So
you're good. You're good.
for the next one, I have not seen this, but I know it's one of your favorites, so I'm making an exception for the random movie list because I know you're going to want to talk about The Town.
Oh my god. Is this part of our list, or can I just rant on it for a second?
I would say go ahead and just rant, and then if we get to one that I really like that you haven't seen, I'll put it in my ranking, and you can have The Town be in yours, and they'll be like honorary.
Okay, sounds good. Town is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is one of the movies that I've given like a full 5 stars to. I've watched it so many times. It actually is a movie that I like to watch on Valentine's Day because I think it's actually a really good love story. And it is just the book, I will say, the book is a lot better, but the movie is also amazing. So that should just tell you how good the book is. But it's Ben Affleck directing, Ben Affleck starring. I'm a huge fan. He's one of my favorite actors. He's great in this. Um, he's a great director as well. I think the best job he's directed. John Hamm, Jeremy Renner, like everyone in it is incredible. It's got Rebecca Hall in it, who's one of my like favorite actresses that I feel like is still not near that like A list where she's like in a lot of stuff and she's really good, but like most people probably don't like know her name much and she doesn't get like huge roles. Um, but yeah,
The
no, I
gift
love this
chick.
movie. Yes, yeah, exactly. The gift chick. Um, uh, yeah, I love Boston movies for whatever reason. I'm not normally like a mob movie guy, but when it comes to like a Boston mob movie, I'm like all about it. And so this is just like a Boston crime thriller, bank robbers. Ben Affleck is like raised in this environment where his dad was a famous bank robber, and his entire town, like blue collar, working class Boston neighborhood, like they have a huge culture of crime and bank robbers. And so he's grown up in this world, and then he falls in love with this girl, Rebecca Hall, and she like is too good for him, but he like really loves her. So it's like, are we products of our environment or are we inherently bad? Like, can he escape this life? If they run away together, is he still going to be a criminal? Or like, is the crime a part of him or is it just connected to the environment that he grew up in? And so it just covers these like really good issues. It's like really good character study, a really good love story. I love it. You need to see it ASAP.
All right, I'll add it to my list. I think I talked about this before, but I famously didn't see this when I was younger because I saw the nun masks in the trailer and thought it was a horror movie, and it scared the crap out of me when I was like 10 or whatever. So that's why I never saw this movie.
It's in like one scene. They just used that for all the marketing because it looked really like eerie and ominous.
Yeah, so that's the. No, but now that I know it's not a horror movie. Actually, to be fair, most horror movies don't scare me now anyway, so I would still watch it. But as a kid, that's just why. Um, have you seen Die Hard with a Vengeance? That's Die Hard 3.
I've only seen the original,
You've only seen the
so
original. Okay.
that will be
So
remedied soon, I promise.
I promise not to do a big rant on this one. I just want to say the people on this website gave it a 56 out of 100. And that is a criminally terrible rating. And all I will say is, since you haven't seen it, the second one is classic sequel, not as good as the first, but still solid. A lot of people, I'm not even saying like a few people, a lot of people say the third movie is better than the first movie. It's Jeremy Irons as the bad guy, and they introduce Samuel L. Jackson as Bruce Willis's like Robin throughout the film, and everybody is just perfect. There are like I'm not even joking. Probably I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of people who have seen the whole franchise put three above one, even though one is like the classic that, as you know, a lot of people say is like the greatest action movie ever. So like it's insane that these people have it rated as a 56. That's just crazy to me.
I will watch the whole franchise eventually, I promise.
Have you seen Under Siege?
I watched that literally for the first time like a month ago.
Okay, good.
Funny
So we can
timing.
talk about it.
I had never seen a Steven Seagal movie before,
Oh,
and I was at a Second in Charles, and they had Under Siege. I had some store credit I was trying to use, and they had Under Siege for like $2. And I was like, should I do it? And then I did it. And I watched it, and it was about everything I expected. I didn't really like it. It was just really, really bad, cheesy action with Steven Seagal. And his entire reputation precedes him. That's all I'll say.
so another one where I pretty much have to disagree. Don't get me wrong. I've seen a lot of his other movies. He's pretty crappy in everything else. Terrible human being. We all know what he's done. There's a reason why he only works overseas now. But for Under Siege 1 and Under Siege 2, which is Die Hard on a Boat and Die Hard on a Train, I loved these as a kid. I own both of them. It's been a while since I've rewatched the second one, but I just rewatched the first one with my dad a few weeks ago. Um, Tommy Lee Jones is great. Gary Busey's great. And I can look past Steven Seagal being like the worst actor ever. But I know this is because I like cheesy action movies and you do not. So for all the listeners, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. If you like this kind of movie, like if you like Commando, you will love Under Siege. It is very fun, in my opinion. But I also very much enjoy, and this is kind of an action movie stereotype, extremely over the top villains. And I think you can agree that Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey are about as over the top in this as physically possible.
Yes. Yeah, like you said, I'm just not a fan of this genre, but I could definitely see how someone like you that is would really like this.
And I also want to point out these people gave Under Siege a 78, but they gave Die Hard with a Vengeance a 56. Objectively
It's,
speaking, not even like my own personal bias, Die Hard with a Vengeance is so much better than Under Siege. Anyway, I rest my case.
he's just a terrible, like, I can't even say he's a terrible actor because I don't even think he was acting. He was just like reading lines.
Um,
Like he wasn't
the
trying.
Oh yeah, no, like there's it's bad. So I'm gonna send you a video so that way you can have some fun with this. But for the listeners, there's a group on YouTube called Corridor Crew, who they do a video where they make Steven Seagal in John Wick because John Wick 4 had just come out. It's hugely popular, and there'd been a huge discussion online of is Keanu Reeves the reason why it's popular, or would John Wick be popular no matter what? So they said, what if we put Steven Seagal in John Wick, and the video is hilarious. They also, at the beginning, they break down everything about Steven Seagal if you don't know who he is. They show clips of how he has no idea how to handle guns. Of course, he lied about being a famous martial artist. He doesn't even really do real martial arts in his movies. He's got a weird run. There's all the sexual assault stuff in real life. Like, it's insane when you really look into Steven Seagal. So yeah, that's
He also had like a really weird accent. Like I don't know where he's from,
yeah.
but like it's a weird accent, and he wasn't like trying to like he wasn't even attempting to mask it at all. And it didn't fit his character, who was supposed to be like a all-American Navy SEAL.
Yeah, that I apologize I'm bringing this up again because I just watched it. So I just recently watched Con Air for the listeners at home, and Nicolas Cage has the worst Southern accent I have ever heard in a movie, and apparently he originally wasn't supposed to have it, but Nicolas Cage said he wanted it because he thought it would make the character more relatable, and then he spent time in Alabama to try and learn the accent. failed terribly in my opinion. And it's funny that you then bring it up in something like this because I also remember he famously like did not have the accent in the script, but he said it would make the character more relatable. And I think it's supposed to be Southern, but it's clearly not.
It just was weird all around. I really didn't like it much at all. I think I gave it like a 2 or 2.5, if just because it had some entertainment value.
Yeah, there are better fun movies to watch, but I still like Under Siege. And it could also be like nostalgia bias because I liked it when I was younger. But
And actually, fun fact, Under Siege 2 was the screenwriting debut of Matt Reeves.
ah, well, there you go. And also in my personal opinion, Under Siege 2, when like from remembering it as a kid, I thought it was better than the first one. So maybe it's because Matt Reeves did it. Um, actually, if I remember correctly, uh, yeah, I know this guy. That's right. Katherine Heigl is the girl in it, and then Eric Bogosian. He's in stuff. Okay.
Sure, he is.
Anyway, sorry. The guy, I think from what I remember, Under Siege 2 is better than the first one, or at least I liked it better than the first one. I don't think the public liked it better than the first one. Anyway, have you seen iRobot?
I have. I really like this one. This is
Okay.
like a nostalgia favorite of mine because my mom really liked this movie, and so I watched it a lot as a kid. I haven't really watched it too recently. Had to have been at least a couple years ago since I watched it, but I watched this a lot as a kid. It's like prime Will Smith, mid 2000s. I've never actually read the original Isaac Asimov story, but I've always wanted to. Apparently, they're very different, but the whole like Asimov's three laws of robotics thing's really cool. Obviously, AI is like a hot topic right now, so it might be worth going back to rewatch it and see what it has to say. But yeah, I just remember this being a really good at like it's not really like an action movie. It's really more like I'm sure it's much more action than the original novel, but it still is very thoughtful where it asks a lot of like really deep pondering questions about like what makes us human and why an AI can or can't be considered human. And so as far as like AI movies go, I think it's probably one of the more philosophical and insightful, and I appreciate that.
So this one's interesting. I never watched it when I was younger. I knew it existed, of course. Then, to your point, a few years ago, I was in an artificial intelligence class and we had to watch it and then like talk about it and stuff. And so, while I thought the movie was good because of the way it was shown to me, I didn't like it didn't really resonate as well, if that makes sense. Like we were watching it in chunks, we were stopping and dissecting and blah blah blah. And so it was like a weird way to kind of first be introduced to the movie. So objectively speaking, I thought it was good, but like personal bias, I ended up not liking it as much as I maybe would have if I just watched it on my own, if that makes sense, like the way it was delivered.
Has one of my like favorite movie exchanges of all time when Will Smith, who's like this really like robot phobic cop in this future where like AI robots have taken over, and there's this robot Sonny who's like gained like in like awareness, and he's like interrogating him, and Will Smith is or like Sonny is like, why can't I be human? And then Will Smith is like, you can't write symphonies and you can't, paint, all this art, and then Sonny's just like, can you? And it's just like it's this really interesting, like I said, very insightful, like makes you like ponder and be like, I certainly couldn't write a symphony right now, so why is that my standard?
Do you know what the Turing test is?
Yes, I'm familiar.
Okay, never I the then I don't know if the conversation necessarily goes anywhere, but that is the universal standard for the test of what is human.
Right, exactly.
Um, have you seen Death Note? Like the
No,
movie with the brothers, the Naked Brothers band guy.
Adam Wingard one. No, I have not.
Okay, so I will pass through that one. Did you see The Foreigner?
I didn't. No.
Okay, real quick before I pass through. I was absolutely like bar set as high as physically possible for this movie, and I thought it was a huge letdown. Just putting it out there, very, very disappointed. And this is
They
another
like
movie. These people gave this movie an 84 out of 100. So like, I think I just disagree with everything these guys do.
what wasn't that the one of the movies where it's like the trailers made it look like an action movie and then it's like absolutely not an action movie?
Yes, every single action sequence was in the trailer. So the plot is that Jackie Chan's son, if I remember correctly, or daughter, was murdered, and he wants to bring the person to justice, but it was on different soil from his homeland. And so Pierce Brosnan is like the agent who's trying to be like, "Hey, don't worry, like we're gonna figure it out," and then he does nothing with it. And so Jackie Chan is supposed to go after the agency and then find out who murdered the person. But the entire thing just evolves into like a diplomatic drama, but there's no drama. Like whoever wrote it didn't have drama experience maybe. Like it's really weird. It's extremely slow for no reason, and I think they were trying to build tension, and it was like you could tell they were trying, but then there would randomly be an action sequence, and from my memory there was only like two, maybe three, and they both were in the trailer, and it was just really, it was weird. It was a bad movie. I was very disappointed. Okay. Have you seen No Country for Old Men?
Um, I, I liked this one, not as much as most people seem to, because this is like lauded as like one of like, oh, like the best movies of the 2000s, or like, the best, whatever, Western, modern Western or whatnot. And I've seen it once. Mostly it was just like to check it off because most people like put it so high. And it was fine. I remember it being very slow, and I remember the conclusion especially being very unsatisfying. And it was one of those situations where like the ending is like notoriously bad, and then they're like, "Oh, well, like in the book the ending's bad, and that's like the point." And I'm like, "So the point is that the ending sucks? That's not a very good point." But it's like one of those things where like people appeal to like the source material as like, oh, you can't change it because that's how it is in the source material. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, Josh Brolin's great. Tommy Lee Jones is great. I haven't seen too many Coen Brothers movies, but I got a lot of Coen Brothers like isms in this movie, and I feel like I wouldn't like their style because like it has a weird sense of humor, and I've heard that's the case for a lot of their movies where like there's like very serious sequences, but then some things are just kind of like goofy, like kind of out of place, and I felt that a lot in this one. And then I thought Javier Bardem is like what's his name, like Anton Chigurh or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he was great, sociopathic villain, really menacing, and people are like, "Oh, one of the best movie villains of all time." I guess because I didn't like the movie that much or like as much, I can't say that personally, but I did think he was a good villain and he played that well. So it's all right. It's not one of my favorites by far, but I wouldn't say it was bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give a shout out because uh one of my good friends, we were just talking about how the Coen brothers are his favorite directors of all time, and how he pretty much loves every movie. And I shouldn't even say pretty much. I think he said he literally has loved every Coen brothers movie. To your point, we were talking about the like Coen brothers isms of it being slow and kind of some weird humor and whatnot. I also don't really like. He's like a super huge fan of him. So just want to give the guy a shout out. I know he's a podcast listener. But yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I'll echo what I said to him. They're not really my thing. The only Coen Brothers movie that I have liked is Suburbicon, and the Coen Brothers wrote it, but George Clooney directed it, which I think is really random. And maybe the directing changes some stuff slightly, but since it's still written by the Coen brothers, I guess that counts. But yeah, Suburbicon is really the only one I've watched that I liked like a good amount. I've seen Big Lebowski, I've seen Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the No Country for Old Men, and I thought they were fine, but I like they didn't immediately become like my favorites, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I'm at. The Coen brothers aren't really my thing. I would probably put them one or two rungs above like a Wes Anderson, where it's just like I I don't hate it. It's just really not my thing. They are like their own people, and those people are not me. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm looking at their filmography. I've literally seen this. That is it. I
Only
haven't
No
seen
Country for Old Men. I
I
thought.
haven't
Oh,
seen Raising
yeah.
Arizona. I haven't seen Fargo. I haven't seen Big Lebowski. I haven't seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
So what's interesting is Raising Arizona is one I actually put on my list of like the classics that I don't think are good, if I remember correctly. That's one of like the first movies Nicolas Cage did, and my dad really liked it, so he showed it to me, and I didn't like it. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is one of Connor's favorite movies of all time. I didn't. I like famously did not like that one, but I think it's because of the circumstances and how I watched it. And the what was the other one you said?
I think I remember that story.
Uh, Fargo, I actually think is like the one movie you'd like because the premise is something that is a type of movie you'd normally watch. But other than that, um, like the Fargo is more of like a like crime kind of drama that I feel like would be more up your alley. Other than that, though, I don't know if I'd recommend a Coen Brothers movie.
I mean, True Grit, I've heard was really good.
I did actually, yeah, no, I did hear that one was good. That's fair. I haven't seen that one though. Okay. Wow, we just got RoboCop a second time. All right, let's review it again. Ooh, Unhinged.
I did not see that.
No, you haven't seen it?
I know you were a big fan.
Yeah, this is gonna be my The Town real quick because I can already tell you right now, unless we get another movie, this will be my number one. Um, so I'm just gonna rant real quick. Okay. So, as I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, growing up, never really liked the guy. I didn't watch a lot of his movies. I have become like the biggest Russell Crowe fan. I've yet to see a movie with him in it that I hated. I feel like he's just such a good actor, and I know I'm getting into him at the end of his career. Like I didn't watch him in his heyday, so take that as you will. But Unhinged. Okay, so there's a woman who's having a bad day, and there's Russell Crowe, who's having a bad day. They both wind up on the same street together at, I think it's a red light. And she ends up honking her horn just a little too loud because he wasn't looking when it was time to go. And this pisses him off. And so he's like, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I wasn't looking at the light. Just for the future, you don't have to slam in the horn. It's like social etiquette to just do a little beep. Then I look and I go." And she's like, "What the heck are you talking about, man? I'm gonna freaking honk when I want to honk." Blah, 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 blah. And they've like set up that she's normally a nice woman, but she's just completely having a bad day. And that's the point of the movie. The point is, you never know who's in another car. You should never let road rage get the best of you. You never know if somebody else is having a bad day. And Russell Crowe keeps trying to be nice, and she's like, "Stop talking to me." Blah blah blah. And so the whole rest of the movie, Russell Crowe decides he's gonna murder her friends, her family, her boss. He like goes around literally stalking everywhere she goes, murdering tons of people until eventually he's gonna go after her. And so it's a thriller, but it devolves into a pseudo slasher kind of. Like it's not really a horror movie, it's more action just with like horror level gore. But it is so good. Russell Crowe plays like the best psycho. But it's so good because you get where he's coming from. I think I've talked about this before. My favorite villains in movies are villains who have a like legitimate reason for doing what they're doing to the point where you almost root for them even though you are being told they are the bad guy, but you're like, "Well, wait a second. They're also justified." And so, like you said, is there a, or I shouldn't say like you said, you could make the argument that he takes it a little too far, or what is the level to which the karma is even or whatever, and like that's the philosophical debate for later. But the point of like just always being nice to people because you never know who's having a bad day is just hammered home so much, and it's just such a good movie. I highly recommend this to you. I highly recommend this to the audience. This is one of the few movies I bought at full price because I just wanted to own it so badly. It's so good.
Yeah, I actually heard pretty good things about this, and I like Russell Crowe too, so I'm sure this will be one that I check out eventually.
This is definitely. Oh, that's a. I thought you had seen it. I'm shocked that you have not. That one. That one I heavily recommend.
That was one of those 2020 films, right, where it was like VOD during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it. I think it came on like Amazon Prime or something. Like I remember we didn't have to. Like I remember getting to watch it on one of the streaming services.
Okay, there you go.
Is this the? Hold on one second, because I think I've seen this movie, and I want to make sure. Yeah, yeah. Have you seen Secret Window?
I haven't, but believe it or not, this is actually one of my mom and brother's favorite movies.
This is a really good movie. Okay, so I'll skip this one, but this is one you should definitely watch. I think it'd be right up your alley.
Based on a Stephen King novella too. So,
Okay, that's actually cool. I did not know that. So that is good to know. Oh, okay. I know you like this movie, Zodiac.
ooh, okay, all right. Automatic number one. We don't need anything else. um, I love this movie. I have said when we did directors, David Fincher is my favorite working director right now. Zodiac is my third favorite movie of his. It's I believe I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5. I do think it's a little slow in the middle, but other than that, it's perfect. I love everything about this movie. I love true crime. I love the mystery of the Zodiac killer specifically, and this movie has just so many incredible performances. Jake Gyllenhaal, Robert Downey Jr., Mark Ruffalo, and it really dives deep into like the lore of the Zodiac killer with just real information that you can go and look at the movies being just truthful and forthright with everything sort of like comes to its own conclusion but also leaves it somewhat open that you can kind of come they basically point to like oh it most likely is this guy but it still kind of leaves it a little open like you can take the evidence yourself and sort of come to your own conclusion but it's still not afraid to like go with the conclusion that the book it's based on goes with. But no, it's just great. It incorporates all the true crime elements. There's some elements that are just straight up horror. Sort of like David Fincher going back to his roots with Seven, where there's just like sequences of just like there's sequences that on their own are very horrific that work really well. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of the subject matter. It's pulled off perfectly. It's a great just like detective story and also just like covers themes about like obsession because Jake Gyllenhaal's character was worked for the newspaper that he sent his ciphers to, and he became like obsessed with cracking the cipher and finding out his identity, and to the point he neglects like his wife and kids, and it becomes like his life. And so it's like a tale about obsession, and I think there's some interesting commentary there with like how we view serial killers now and how we like obsess over them and we get so engrossed in like their lives and true crime and things like that. And so it's just overall just anyone who likes the genre, it's like the number one I'd recommend if you said you wanted a true crime movie.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you said. As you know, I'm not as high on Fincher as you are. However, objectively speaking, I thought this was a very good movie. When it comes to doing rankings, this wouldn't be one that I would choose to watch. Most likely, like I think I've told you, there are movies that I can 100% admit are like really, really, really good, even if my own opinion, I don't think they have as much rewatch value to me. And I would say Zodiac falls in line with that. It would have to be a very specific mood I was in to go for it. I think I would actually probably pick to watch Seven again before I'd watch Zodiac. But that's definitely not taking away from the fact that this is a very good movie. I hadn't actually seen this until I think it was right after we did Best Directors podcast, maybe. It was one of the podcasts where you were ranting really hard about Zodiac, and I was like, all right, I just need to go ahead and watch this. But I thought it was really good.
One thing I will say, it's probably one of my favorite details in movies that show that I just think it's such
Oh,
a cool
I knew
detail.
this. Okay.
Um, they show different they show for the cases where there was a survivor of the Zodiac killer, like both didn't get killed, they because they had a survivor who talked about how the scene went in real life, they have a different actor being the Zodiac killer in each one of these scenes that they all kind of look similar, but they're not the same. And so it just creates that illusion of like you don't really know who he is. He's just like a drawing, like a police drawing. You don't know who he is, so they pick actors that are like every time they show a new murder, it's different, and it's not even the guy who plays the guy that's their main suspect. They all look alike, but they're all different, and that's just such a really cool detail that I appreciate so much.
That's so I did not know this until you told me. That's one of the reasons that made me want to watch it. And uh we were so you know how you'll watch like a whodunit kind of slasher and you'll try and look at the build of the person who's hunting down the people to try and guess who it is. When we were watching one of those the other day, and it reminded me of the thing you were telling me about Zodiac, and I was like, it's like in one of those like who done it where you're trying to guess, it seems unfair to cast a different actor. You should have the one who's going to be the reveal do it. But also, to your point, in something like Zodiac, that is such a great detail that little extra piece of going above and beyond really just makes you appreciate it more. And the fact that it's like, okay, David really loved this. He really like went above and beyond to do it. So that's just such a cool detail. I love that too. And so I just think that's really cool.
It's definitely my number. It'll be hard to see if anything could uproot that. That's my number one.
Have you seen Man on a Ledge?
I have not.
Have you seen Phone Booth?
I have not, but I have been wanting to.
Okay. Phone Booth is definitely one you should see. Okay. So I only had two prepped, so give me uno segundo as I continue the randomization. Da, 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 da. Ooh, have you seen Shot Caller?
I have not, but my brother likes that movie.
Okay, that one could be an interesting conversation. It may be worth a watch. Ironically, so there's two dudes who rank on this website, and normally they're pretty similar. The one guy gave it a 99 out of 100, and the other guy gave it a 33 out of 100, which I think speaks to the movie itself. I was very excited for it and didn't like it, but if your brother really liked it, then there you go. That's like the. I feel like this may be just there isn't a middle ground with this movie.
Sense.
Okay. I just want to point out I just randomized White House down.
But you haven't seen it, right?
No, I have not seen it.
Okay.
Have you seen Pitch Black? That's the first Riddick movie.
I have.
Okay, so we can do that.
So this is probably one that I'm going to be able to talk about the least because I did watch this, but it's been so long. Like I think it was like high school. I watched it on like television, so I honestly can't comment on it too much, but I do remember it. Um, what I do remember is it didn't really do enough to make me want to watch sequels. I know you like these movies, so that probably
Well,
hurts to say or hurts to hear.
don't worry. You'll
But
you'll see in a second why it's not as hurtful as you think.
yeah, I just don't remember this one being very memorable. I mean, granted, like I said, I only saw it once. It was like 8 years ago or so, but like it didn't leave any impression on me or make me want to ever watch it again or like watch a sequel.
hmm
So I honestly
Um,
can't really comment much about it.
So, to your point, the first one's really not that good. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, normally when I start a franchise, I do the whole thing, even if there's parts I don't like. So, with this one, I knew I wanted to see the full Chronicles of Riddick. I was doing a full, I'm going to watch all the filmography of Vin Diesel. And so, Pitch Black did not hook me at all. It's also like a super horror movie as opposed to like in action. Whereas the second one is all action, and Chronicles of Riddick is 10 times better. Most people say that's the best one. We bring in Carl Urban as the villain back before he got famous. He's awesome. They completely expand the lore. It becomes way more sci-fi. Like it's something that would honestly be more up your alley than it would be mine, which I think is interesting because I know you're really into the more like sci-fi alien type of stuff. And they talk about all these different worlds, and we find out where Riddick came from, and we learn about like the economies of these different places, and they like go heavy into the lore building, but it works. and the second one is really good. Then this is the weirdest trilogy probably I've ever seen because there was a bunch of issues with getting the actors back and getting the writer, and so the third movie, Riddick, goes back to its horror roots where it has a young Dave Bautista and a bunch of other people you'd probably recognize get stranded in this hut on the middle of one of these planets on an expedition, and then a bunch of these random aliens that are similar, if I remember correctly, to the ones from the first movie, converge on them in this hut. And it becomes more of a bottle story with some good action. I would say it's a way better actual horror movie than the first one, which is also funny. Like the first one is really really bad, though it's the most famous one. People remember it. It did really well in theaters, which shocked me. And but then the second one is much better. It's a better action movie, and the third one is much better as a horror movie. So like I would recommend the second and third one. I would bet you'd probably like the third one the best because it's the type of horror you like. But also the second one, as far as lore goes, you'd get to have fun with that. But they don't expand on the lore at all in the third one. They because of all those issues that happen, and they've been. I think Fury is the name of the planet he's from, and they've been trying to make a fourth one for ages, and Fury has been in development hell for just years. And so I don't know if it's ever going to happen. But this is like the weirdest trilogy I've ever watched because all three movies, even though they are completely canon and completely connected, feel like anthology films because they are in no way like thematically connected or tonally, I should say. Like it's just so weird. But yeah, Pitch Black, I would agree, is not good, especially in comparison to the two sequels.
All I really remember about this is the in Smosh when they were like, if
Yeah.
horror movies were honest, and it's like pitch black and it's just black for like 2 seconds. I just remember that gag. So what's that? Which one's that?
Mission Impossible 3 is the one with the guy who passed away, who I'm drawing a blank on.
Oh, no, you're
Philip
good.
Seymour Hoffman.
I just didn't. You had broken up a bit, so I didn't even hear what title you were saying.
Oh,
Of course, I know Mission Impossible 3.
I didn't know if maybe you had just forgotten because they all. If you had, if it had been 4 or 5, I would have needed your help explaining which one was which. But I remember 1, 2, 3, and 6 vividly.
Yeah, is one that I've said before. Mission Impossible is probably my favorite ongoing movie franchise right now. I'm a huge fan of these movies. I've watched them through so many times, and very recently, like last year before Dead Reckoning. 3 is like pretty much firmly in the middle for me. In the franchise. It's the one that I found has fluctuates the most on people's lists, actually. Like, some people either have 3, like, really high up or really low down or, like, somewhere in the middle like me. It actually like, most of the others in general, I feel like the franchises in general ranked very similarly amongst people, but 3 is the one that I feel like moves around the most. Um, so yeah, it's in the middle. Like I said, it's my favorite franchise, so even the middle, I'm gonna like a lot. I still do like this one. The reason it's not as high, um, J.J. Abrams, not one of my favorite directors. He very much made this more of like a straightforward action movie with just like gunfights and sieges and things like that. And that's never really been what the Mission Impossible franchise is about. And so I'm not necessarily a big fan of making it more of a straightforward action movie. Um, I can excuse the lens flares and everything being bright and neon, but yeah, other than that, Owen Davian is a great villain. Philip Seymour Hoffman, probably one of my favorite villains in the franchise. He's just so iconic and he's just so just cunning and cold. Um, the team is not particularly memorable here. This was before they'd really like solidified of like, we're bringing Simon Pegg back. We're gonna have, you know, uh, we're bringing Simon Pegg back. We're gonna bring Rebecca Ferguson back. Like, we're gonna keep these characters. This was when like every movie was a different team back in that era, and
Mhm.
this team I feel like is probably the least memorable. And yeah, I like the stuff with his family. Ethan having the wife and having to separate his two lives, and then the two lives collide, and coming to terms with that, and so being brought back in when he thought he was out. And I just feel like overall, and I'm glad they got to come back to it in Fallout. I guess light spoilers for that. um And just like, I don't know, it just adds to Ethan Hunt as a character because for the most part, he's kind of just like he's Ethan Hunt. He's like the agent. That's like his thing. That's his character. But this was like, okay, well, what is Ethan Hunt the person? And so I feel like this is probably the best character work that Ethan's had. So like there's a lot of good in this. There's some stuff that's kind of meh to me that doesn't quite work. So that's why it's kind of just like firmly in my middle.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you know, I just watched the Mission Impossible movies for the first time. I think it was in like June or August, something like summer ish. And watching them all together either was the best idea or the worst idea. But if I remember correctly, I had six number one and I think three number two. Um, but it's interesting that you talked about some people having it low on their list. I felt like when I was doing research just after watching it, it felt like most people had three number one or six. So I felt like I was pretty much in line with the stuff that I was watching, um, or at least reading. Yeah, this one was interesting because as the Mission Impossible franchise did not immediately attach to me as much as it did to you. Like you said, it's either one of your favorites or it is your favorite, and so I would not go that far, though I could see why people like them, if that makes sense. So while I say Mission Impossible 3 was like my second favorite, if I remember correctly, um, the Mission Impossible franchise as a whole was not one of my favorites. So I guess take that as you will, but to your point, Philip Seymour Hoffman is awesome. He's another actor who I don't think I've disliked anything he's been in. So yeah, that's kind of what I'd say about that one.
Yeah, it's solid. Um, J.J. Abrams' feature film debut. Fun fact.
Oh,
He'd
as a
o-
director?
yeah, for
Okay.
directing, he'd only done TV before. He'd written movies, but as far
Yeah,
as directing, he'd only done like TV.
okay. I know that you told me about that Joyride horror movie that he randomly wrote, and I just assumed he directed it as well, but I didn't know for sure.
And it was because he had a show called Alias in the early 2000s that was like a spy thriller action show.
Uh-huh.
And I think Jennifer Garner was the star, but Tom Cruise was a huge fan of Alias, and he literally was like, "All right, get me that guy to do the next Mission Impossible movie." So he was like personally requested by Tom Cruise.
Yes, it was Jennifer Garner. Um, and that is
So Tom
actually
Cruise is to
funny.
blame for Disney ruining Star Wars.
That That's the funniest leapfrog because of Mission Impossible 3. Tom Cruise is to blame for. Oh my god, that's really funny. Okay. Um, did you see Shadow in the Cloud?
No, I don't know what that movie is.
It's Chloe Grace Moretz is a gunner during World War II, but she's a female on a plane with a bunch of men, and then they end up fighting goblins in the sky. It's such a weird movie.
Sounds very interesting.
Have you seen Cobra?
I have not.
Okay. So then next would be Rambo First Blood Part 2.
No, I've only seen First Blood.
Okay.
That's
That's
another
right. You
franchise after Die Hard, where I promise I'll get to it.
Die Hard, Rambo, you're killing me here, man. No, it's okay. Oh, A Good Day to Die Hard. We can't cover that one. Have you seen The Raid?
I have not. That's
Okay.
a thriller. I'm surprised.
Well, I'm looking at these, and a lot of these they're just considering action to be thriller the way that like the because you know how we were talking about earlier how it kind of thriller ranges from extremely dramatic like a No Country for Old Men to I guess The Raid, but it's way more action related. Like I don't know, that honestly could be more of a while I'm randomizing, I'm going to ask you, how do you define thriller?
I think just anything. I don't want to say anything that like really grabs your attention because that's supposed to be any movie, but I feel like it's those movies where your heart rate increases, your adrenaline spikes, and you're like glued to the screen. Because when you're like watching like a comedy, like sure you can be invested, but you're not like fully dialed in, can't wait to see what the very next second contains. So I feel like
Yeah.
it's more or less defined by like how you and your body are reacting to it.
So I agree, and I actually think you said exactly what I was going to say. Thriller is where your heart is racing and you're wondering what's going to happen next. But where I differentiate thriller from action is the actual effects. And what I mean by that is once you start going for the action stereotypes of super hand to hand combat, extreme explosions, stuff like that, to me it becomes more action than thriller. I think that the thrillers are like you think of spies or espionage or political dramas, like the stuff that there's a little bit here and there, but it's way more intent on telling a good story with a lot of intrigue, and that's where the heart racing comes from, if that makes sense.
Right. And I feel like with thrillers, it's like you're always trying to be one step ahead. Like with a comedy or with a drama, you're very much like, okay, this is happening, this is happening. A thriller is like, okay, this is happening, so what's going to happen next?
Yeah, okay. I definitely agree with that. So the next one is Bullet Train.
Oh, I love Bullet Train. Um, you've you've mentioned David Leitch being one of your favorite directors. I think he your favorite director on that list?
No, my favorite director is Robert Rodriguez, but I think I had
Oh,
David
right.
Leitch at 3 or 4.
Right, right, right. Um, yeah, I loved Bullet Train. I just loved the energy. I loved the vibe. It was absolutely star-studded, but it didn't feel like one of those things where they're just trying to put famous people in there for the sake of famous people. Even the cameos are very funny, and there are several. It's just such a funny movie, such a great time, just so enjoyable, just like can watch, and just high energy, fast paced, great action, genuinely funny, just everything about it. It's just such an enjoyable good time.
So I scrolled back up. It was Robert Rodriguez, Eli Roth, Wes Craven, David Ayer, David Leitch.
Yeah, I got it flipped.
um, yeah, no, I completely agree. I thought Bullet Train was absolutely amazing. I was familiar with the manga it was based off of. I didn't know there was an anime made first. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's good. But I thought Bullet Train was awesome. I thought this was casted perfectly. I thought it perfectly blended the action with the comedy. This is gonna sound weird. I think my favorite kind of comedy is where it's like that type of comedy where they're just speaking normally but it's funny, like as opposed to setting up a joke and then paying it off. They're just talking and then I'm laughing, if that makes any sense. Like the fact that
Completely.
Brad Pitt is consistently having this inner monologue where he's trying to figure out, because he's in therapy, so it's like, oh, am I really a good guy? Should I really be murdering? And then I just love the Aaron Taylor Johnson was awesome. I'm drawing a blank on his on the Choo Choo Train guy's name, but that duo probably stole the show for me. But that is definitely not diminishing the fact that Brad Pitt was awesome. Really, every character except for Joey King I enjoyed. She kind of annoyed me, but everybody else I loved.
Brian Tyree Henry is his name.
There we go. Thank
Um,
you. The
yeah,
the guy from
they're both
Godzilla versus Kong.
right. They're both three named gentlemen. But
And they
yeah,
both are in
no,
the
they're both
Godzilla
great.
franchise. I just realized that because Aaron Taylor Johnson's in Godzilla from 2014.
That's true. That's true. And they're both in the MCU because he's Quicksilver and then Brian Tyree Henry is in Eternals.
Ah, okay. I didn't know he was in Eternal. So there you go. They are just brothers in everything. They do
Gosh.
everything
Yeah,
together.
no. This is probably one of the most enjoyable movies I'd say of the past couple of years in terms of just like pure entertainment value.
And I think the fact that you could have not felt this way, but I did not expect anything going in. I was just like, "Oh, this trailer looks fun." And then I completely was blown out of the water with how good it was. So I think that also helped with like shoving it over the top for me. This I would agree. This is one of the most enjoyable movies of the last few years, and I would argue it's one of the better action movies of the last few years. I just thought it was really good, like all encompassing.
The thing is, like, I saw the trailer and the trailer was really good. And nowadays, when I see a really good trailer, especially for like a comedy, I'm like, is all the funny parts just in the, in this case, it's one of the rare instances where they're definitely not just all in the trailer.
Yeah, I would agree that this was a good instance where the trailer was good and then the movie was still good. Um, Before I keep randomizing, I just wanted you to know that I just got The Rock, which I think is funny because I'm about to watch it, and I know you were talking earlier about how good it is. Um, have you seen Event Horizon?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so that'll be our
Once
next one.
definitely a horror movie,
Yeah,
more like on the
this
horror
is a
side of the
thriller.
spectrum. Yeah, Event Horizon is a complicated movie for me because I'm trying to think of how to word this. It's nothing in it is bad, but none of it reaches the potential that it should have. And a lot of this, there's a lot of interesting history with this one. There's basically a Snyder cut out there where there was an original cut of the movie that was completely different and they completely bastardized it for this theatrical version where the the whole plot, it's like very Lovecraftian. I'm a huge fan of Lovecraft and his works. It's like cosmic horror, and that's one of my favorite horror genres that I don't feel like is used enough. Um, but essentially it's basically like black holes and wormholes to hell and like interconnecting like sci-fi with like demons and hell and like old gods and underworld stuff. And the movie, I don't know if the final movie is like PG-13, but from what I've heard, the original filmed version that's still out there somewhere is like very hard R, really leaning in on just like horrific sequences. And one scene is literally apparently a demonic blood orgy, whatever that means. I want to see it. Um, but just like really like think like Hellraiser, just like but like dialed up to like an 11. And then the studio was like, yeah, but we want to make this more like mainstream, so we're gonna like cut out 30 minutes and we're gonna rewrite a whole bunch of it and make it more like palatable. And so it just never feels like it goes the lengths that it needs to go for like being a cosmic horror movie. And maybe one day we'll get that full original version because it is filmed. But it's probably, unfortunately, it seems like it's just rotting in some studio somewhere and it'll probably never be recovered because there's never even been like an inkling that they were even considering like putting it out.
So, I looked it up. Event Horizon is an R, but I did know what you were talking about. How there's just a better cut out there. This was done by Paul Wes Anderson, which I think is kind of funny because, of course, that's Resident Evil guy. Um, and since you mentioned Hellraiser, that's perfect. So since I'm a huge Hellraiser fan, everybody said, "Hey, watch Event Horizon. Watch Event Horizon. It's so good." And there's a chance maybe they just raised the bar for me, and that's why I didn't like it. But I kind of agree with what you said. Nothing about it was actually bad. I just didn't enjoy it. If that makes any sense. Like it was not good, but I also didn't think it was bad. I don't know how else to put it than that. I do know if I remember correctly, aren't you into Warhammer?
For a time I was, but I not actively now. But there was a time when I was.
Okay, so there's a really cool theory that you may or may not have known about where apparently people in the Warhammer 40K world view Event Horizon as a prequel to it because Sam Neill was like a fan and he put an Easter egg in the movie that makes it to where like the warp drive or something is related to something in Warhammer 40K. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't even designed by the director or writer. Sam Neill did it like on his own. But if you're a fan of Warhammer, you'll like immediately pick up on the Easter egg, and it makes Event Horizon technically canon to Warhammer. That's like just a random fun fact on the movie.
So Event Horizon is Henry Cavill's favorite movie. Got it.
There you go. And they're in his new movie or show, whatever they're doing, they're going to do Easter eggs to Event Horizon.
Exactly. They will finally make it canon.
The next one is The Invisible Man, like the newer one.
Okay, so I've talked about this before. It was my favorite movie overall of 2020. Once again, horror. So I've talked about it, so I won't over deliberate here. But huge fan of Lee Winnell. I thought this was a great direction. He takes something that's so familiar, this universal monster in this H.G. Wells original source novel, and turns it into something completely new, completely creative, makes it feel wholly original, even if it is pulling its basic concept from that original IP. But the suspense in this movie is amazing. The tension, the dread in this movie is excellent. And as far as like we were talking about with thrillers, I think this movie might be in like the top 10, maybe even top 5 of movies that have made my heart race just because the sequences are just so enthralling and so suspenseful. So I've talked about it before, so I won't say too much, but yeah, I really love this one.
I'll echo what you say in that we talked about this before, so I won't go too in depth. But just as a refresher, this was one that I was extremely underwhelmed by. I didn't like this when I saw it in theaters. I haven't seen it since. This is one that could probably benefit from a rewatch. Maybe I'd like it more now. I always like to preface when I don't like something that it could have been outside environmental factors or something that led to me not liking it, but I just didn't. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'd leave this one. I know you really like it. I know most of the world liked it, and I'm in the minority.
This will probably be our biggest divide on this 15, I think.
I could see that. Real quick before we get to our next one, I just want to point out that the Warriors was randomly came up, but since of course in the last podcast I talked so hard about it, I just wanted to point out these two guys together gave it an average of a 99 out of 100. So if you didn't already want to see the Warriors, you should go see the Warriors.
Yeah.
Um, have you seen Willy's Wonderland?
No, I saw Five Nights at Freddy's, but not Willy's
Okay.
Wonderland.
Willy's Wonderland is 10 times better than Five Nights at Freddy's. It is one of my favorite Nicolas Cage movies. I highly recommend it to anybody who likes like cult style horror movies. It's so fun. Nicolas Cage is awesome. Speaking of Nicolas Cage, okay, I feel like this is also not a thriller. You've seen Mandy, right?
Oh, I actually haven't.
Oh, you haven't seen Mandy. Okay. That's the I know you've seen Color Out of Space. That's the one you saw.
One's really good. I would recommend that one.
It came out like right after Mandy, and they're basically the same movie. Mandy's like a not uh uh Lovecraft adaptation, but it's basically like from the mind of Lovecraft. Like it feels like it came right out of a Lovecraft book, so I feel like you'd really like Mandy. That one's solid. Um, have you seen The Hitcher? Either the original or the remake?
I have not, but I think you're a big fan of this one, aren't you?
Yeah, so the original's great. I always draw a blank on his name, but it's the guy from Blade Runner who's in
For
Dark
Hauer.
Knight. Yes, Howard's awesome in the original, and then Sean Bean's great in the remake. As you know, I did a whole rant on one of our podcasts about how the Platinum Dunes remakes are severely underrated, and The Hitcher is no different. There's literally a scene where a guy gets his body torn in half by a truck, and it's literally shown on screen over the course of like 5 minutes, and it's just epic. Anyway, the Hitcher is very solid. All right, because of how bad this randomizer has been, I am probably. Oh, okay. Did you see the newest Candyman, the one with Yaya?
This is okay. We're really playing loose with thriller here.
Yeah,
I
I
get we
don't know.
really
They just keep putting horror movies on here.
I mean, I'm fine with that. We're horror fans. Yeah, I really liked this one, and I was very much in the minority. Um, I have seen the first Candyman a couple times. It's never been one that I'm like, a diehard fan of. It's not one of my favorite slashers. I appreciate it. I do like it. And then this one came along. I didn't really have any big expectations, and I saw it, and I mean, yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very worthwhile. It's technically a sequel. It's more like a legacy sequel. Um, I thought it was a worthwhile sequel. Yaya was great. Teyana Paris is great. I thought the directing was done very well for from Nia DaCosta. This was like I think her second film ever, and just like the way that she filmed some of these sequences, they were just done really well, and it was very effective. And I feel like it had a lot of interesting stuff to say about urban legends and lore and folklore and how they start and how they carry on and how, you know, the whole basis of the series is about like folklore and urban legends and stuff and their power. And it sort of like plays with the idea of like there's like going to be different Candymans, because there's different people have different ways that they tell these urban legends. They're not all the same. And so there could be multiple, and then you have the guy who's trying to make the urban legend happen. And so I just thought it did some interesting stuff that was pretty different, while still remaining faithful to the original.
Yeah, so this one's gonna sound like a really weird review. I absolutely loved the cinematography in this movie. I love what they do with like the paper puppets at the beginning and the end. I love the one of my favorite kills over the last couple like years of horror movies was when the camera's zooming out and then we see the woman get murdered up against the wall and like slid around and all you really see is blood because you're so far away, but like there's also the idea that she's in a high rise, so there's all these people next door who have no idea it's happening. Like, I just love that kill. And so, like, as a whole throughout the movie, I thought the cinematography was amazing. I thought a lot of the visuals that they show were awesome, but everything else didn't really hit for me. So I wouldn't necessarily say I disliked it. I also wouldn't necessarily say I liked it. I thought there was stuff to like, but as a whole, I watched it. I was glad I watched it, but I probably wouldn't watch it again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did really like it. I would prefer it to the original, actually, which I know is like a huge hot take, but I
You're
also
good.
I tend to lean that way with horror anyway. So
You the original I think gets pumped up more because it was, if I remember correctly, the first like slasher movie to talk about like urban life, and it was like heralded as one of like the big black horror movies. So I think it gets pumped up more than it probably should. Like it's not a bad movie, but it's also not one of the greats, so to speak. But it had so much political and social commentary around it that like just the culture of the movie, I think, carries it, if that makes sense. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to say you didn't like it. Um,
yeah, and I think it was one of those movies where they definitely had a message, but they weren't like beating you over the head with the message.
yeah, that's fair. Um, so I was gonna call it earlier than 15 because we had been having such bad luck, but then the very next thing I randomized was Belko experiment. So I figure we'll talk about that and then I'll just go until I get to 15 because then I'll just have one more. So go ahead. I know you love Belko experiment.
Didn't this come up when we did horror?
Actually it did. Okay, well then that we can't have it on the same list. Oh my god, I literally scrolled up. I had Belko experiment too. Okay. That's really funny that it's also okay, I didn't even check that. Have you seen Compliance? You cut out if you were speaking.
I have not seen Compliance.
Okay. That one's a really good one. I recommend that one. Um okay, then I'm most likely gonna go ahead and say, oh, the taking of Pelham 123. We were just talking about that. I'm gonna go ahead and say that because we haven't had the greatest of luck with the randomizer, we cut it at 13 right now. Are you okay with that, or do you want me to go until I find the last two?
I think we have 12, don't we?
I have 13. Did you put the town on yours? Remember how we each were gonna take our
Okay, I didn't know if we were officially doing that or not. I did not.
I took Unhinged, so go ahead and put the town in there because I just had to rant about Unhinged.
Let's just find two more. We only got two more.
Okay, Chronicle. I know you've seen that.
Okay, yes, it's been a while. Um, Josh Trank, Michael B. Jordan. It was a solid film. I love found footage. This is one of those found footage movies though that feels like fake found footage, where it just doesn't see it, it's too well done and well produced that it definitely shouldn't be found footage, but it is. It's interesting. It's sort of like that Brightburn sort of thing where it's like, oh, what if people got superpowers and they were like irresponsible and not good, and like what we would do to stop them. So like it creates some interesting issues. So it's like a little bit horror, a little bit superhero, a little bit a whole lot of things. Like I said, young Michael B. Jordan when he's like just kind of starting out, and then Dane DeHaan's in it. Never been a big Dane DeHaan fan, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was solid. I know for a while they've been trying to make a Chronicle too, but then Josh Trank, Fant Four Stick, had its own drama, and he got like canceled in Hollywood, and then he made that really weird, really bad Al Capone movie with Tom Hardy that came out during COVID that like no one saw, and everyone said it was terrible. and so his career is probably just done in general. But that'll probably never happen. But I'd be interested to see where this would go.
Um, Yeah, so this is one where I don't want to say this as a disagree completely, but I absolutely love this movie. I think you're actually the one who recommended it to me because I didn't know it existed, but I'm glad you did. Uh, this is one of the ones that just like every now and then you watch a movie, excuse me, you watch a movie and it just resonates with you, and this was one for me. I loved the idea of like you said, it's kind of the same as Brightburn where it's like what if, but this one is what if normal people got superpowers and how would it actually work in the real world, and they play a lot with different philosophical ideas, and so I really enjoyed the movie. Um, I don't actually know if I'd want a sequel. I think it works really well as a standalone, but I definitely think at least it sounds like I like this movie a lot more than you did. Like you said, the acting's really good. I thought the directing was good. I think it keeps a good pace. It doesn't really feel like it drags or anything like that. So yeah, just overall, I think it's a really good movie.
You ever see this movie called Project Almanac?
Yes, I that sounds really familiar. Hold on.
I
Okay.
always conflate these two movies because they came out around the same time and they both have somewhat similar premises. And so I always just like kind of put them together in my head.
Okay.
It's like
Okay.
it's like almost found footage, but it's like kind of sci-fi too, and like kids getting it over their heads. And I don't know. I just conflate the two.
Yeah, I remember this movie, but I never actually saw it. But I do I remember I'm reading about it, and I remember seeing the trailers for this, and I remember the name, but I never actually saw this one.
Anyway, one more.
So the last one's Don't Breathe.
Okay, I've seen this. Saw it once. Um, I remember not really caring much for it, to be completely honest. Um, Nothing about like I remember it being I don't think the movie is particularly long, but what I remember of it was feeling like it didn't even have as much substance to like justify the runtime that it had. And it felt like they were really kind of dragging it out. And I get it because the whole point is like it's a false setup. Like you think it's one thing and it's really another. But I felt like they spent so much time and then you almost thought the movie was done. And then they're like, just kidding. We have all this other stuff and this whole final act that we need to do. And so I remember it kind of dragging a bit. And of course, by its nature, you can't talk, you don't whatever. It didn't really hold my attention very well, which is my own problem. But I just didn't think when you have a movie like that, you have to really do a lot to like maintain attention when you have, but like, right, people can't make noises and they can't talk and there's no dialogue because I'm very much a dialogue and character guy. So because I'm such a dialogue and character guy, this one was very much just like about the ins and the horror and the thrills. So I could appreciate that about it, but it's not really my favorite. And then it just goes into some really, really disgusting directions that just like were
It gives
just
a real
very
M. Night
off-putting.
Shyamalan ending.
Yeah, very off-putting to say the least.
Uh, um, so this one's really interesting because when I first watched it, I loved it. Then I gave it a rewatch when the sequel was announced, and I didn't like it. Or at least I didn't like it as much as I did the first time, if that makes sense. Like it's almost like it set in, so maybe the like stuff that made it so interesting the first time just didn't hold the second time. It's to the point where I still haven't even seen the sequel. I remember being really like shocked that they would even make a sequel because I was like, how are they going to do a sequel? But I know what they did in the sequel, so I like it makes sense. Anyway, um, yeah, so this one's like if we had ranked this right after I watched it, I'd probably have it much higher. But I remember rewatching it and just not liking it anywhere close to as much as I liked it the first time. I pretty much would echo everything you said. It's definitely like a really cool idea for the first 30 minutes, and then I think it overstays its welcome. Then it's almost like it realizes it does, and then it hits you with that ending you're talking about, which we'll just not discuss out of fear of demonetization.
Yeah. The sequel got very mixed reviews from what I saw. Most people just kind of hated it on the basis of the Stephen Lang being a main character.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, don't they make him a good guy?
So Fede Alvarez, who didn't return to direct it, but he like wrote it and produced it, was like, oh, he's like an anti-villain, where he's not like an anti-hero, where it's someone who does good when there might not be the best person. He's like an anti-villain, where he's like thinks he's good but is really doing bad things. And so take that how you will.
So what you're saying is this just adds to the really weird filmography and career that is Fede Alvarez.
Pretty much. Dude's kind of a question mark.
If I remember correctly, you said this in an earlier podcast. He makes a banger, then he makes a dud. Then he makes a banger, then he makes a dud. And it's like he can't figure out if he's a good director or not.
No, like really pretty much. Like every other movie of his is like amazing, and then every other movie of his is like bad.
So that is 15. So I'll go ahead and go through mine while you are ranking yours. I did just want to point out that I kept randomizing just because I was curious. And if we had not been at 15, we would have gotten Spiderhead and then Barbarian, which I guess I could see how Barbarian would be a thriller, but that's also another one where I feel like it's a horror that they're stretching.
Think I never saw Spiderhead. I would probably put Barbarian as a thriller. I mean, definitely
Interesting.
a
Okay.
horror. Not definitely is horror, but I think it's more of a thriller.
Okay. Okay, that one's interesting. Be glad you didn't see Spiderhead. That was the one with Miles Teller and Chris Hemsworth that came out on Netflix. It was really weird. Um, I almost instantly regretted watching it at the end of it. I don't know. At least I can say I watched it.
So bad about it.
The They set up so many awesome themes that just don't pay off. Like it's kind of one of those things where imagine if you're watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie where you know there's going to be a twist and you're like, "Oh, this is going to be so cool. What is it?" And then they just do exactly what you think is going to happen. Like there is no twist. Does that make sense? Like it's almost like in Last Jedi where everybody had these awesome fan theories from Force Awakens and then in Last Jedi they're just like, no, nothing you thought. It's just this, the most basic thing possible. Like it's almost like they played it safe. And then it also, if you think about it too hard, it negates the awesome like themes and questions that they pose at the beginning of the movie, if that makes sense.
Sense.
Um so yeah, I don't necessarily think it was the worst movie I ever saw, but it's like almost 2.5 hours, so it's just one of those things where, like, if a movie's an hour and a half and I don't like it, I don't feel as bad. But for some reason, the minute a movie's over 2 hours, if I don't like it, I feel like I wasted time.
Sense.
Anyway, um, so for my ranking, this one's going to be more interesting, I think, because I need to give a lot of justification. So if this is your first time watching one of these, the way that I do my rankings is, if I was going to watch a movie right now, which one would I pick? Because objectively speaking, a lot of these are really good movies, and it may be hard to rank just off of like which one's better. And so I also add in rewatchability and which one would I watch now. So at 15 is No Country for Old Men. I pretty much don't want to rewatch that one. At 14, I have Event Horizon. I probably don't really want to rewatch it, but it's also a horror movie, and by proxy, I would choose that over No Country for Old Men, so I'm putting that at 14. At 13, I have The Invisible Man. Like I said, I probably should rewatch this, but I remember just really, really, really not liking it, so I have this a lot lower. You kind of called it. This is probably going to be our most of our where our most variance is in our rankings. At 12, I have Candyman. Like I said, I absolutely love the cinematography and a lot of the visuals that are created in the movie, but the movie as a whole doesn't really resonate with me, so I just have it a little bit lower. At 11, I have Don't Breathe, another one that, like I said at the beginning, loved it on the rewatch, didn't like it, didn't think it held up, and the fact that I've already rewatched it and don't think it has good rewatchability, I'm putting it here. At 10, I have Zodiac. Objectively speaking, amazing movie. Not necessarily something I would like jump to rewatch, but on that first go through, I thought it was awesome. At 9, I put iRobot. I kind of have it in the middle here because, like I said, when we were reviewing, the way I watched this in delivery, I didn't really like it, but it's because it was in a class and it was more like I didn't get to just sit and enjoy the movie. So I actually think I would like to rewatch it just so that way I could enjoy it in its full glory. Then at 8, I have Pitch Black. Uh, I remember liking this enough, and because of that, it's like of the movies above it, it's my least favorite movie of the ones I liked. Like from 9 down, the it's like I didn't like, maybe need to rewatch to decide if I like, and then from 8 up, it's more based off of movies I like being ranked. So Pitch Black's just the least one I liked of ones I'd rewatch, if that makes any sense. At 7, I put RoboCop. That's just good, solid 80s fun, but I would put it a little bit lower because I think we got some other good ones ahead of it. At 6, I put Olympus Has Fallen. I mentioned that I really enjoyed this movie. Probably should give it a rewatch to see if maybe I'd be more on your level, but from what I remember, I really like it. This is probably going to be a shock to you. At 5, I put Mission Impossible 3. Um, I may have this higher than you might have thought, but could be recency bias. I do remember actually really liking the movie. I thought it was one of I think I said I put it at 2 for the Mission Impossible movies, and I generally, as a whole, enjoyed them. Then at 4, I put Under Siege. This one also could have big variance. Like I mentioned, this is like a guilty pleasure for me. Even though it's got Steven Seagal, I love all the characters. I just rewatched this recently. I've probably seen the movie 28 times, so I feel like it would be a disservice for me to put it any lower. At 3, I put Bullet Train. This one was really hard because recency bias really made me want to put Bullet Train at 2 instead of the movie I have it to. But I think I put it at 3 primarily because I just watched this with my dad because he hadn't seen it like a month ago. And so for rewatch, what would I want to watch right now? I put Chronicle at 2 because I remember loving this movie, but it's been so long since I've seen it. I actually physically want to rewatch it like right now. So I went ahead and put that one at 2. And then you saw this coming from a mile away. Number 1 is Unhinged. I physically own this movie. That's how good it is. I pretty much only own movies like I truly, absolutely love. And I would rewatch this movie 10 times over if I had the chance. It is that good. So my number 1 is Unhinged. You probably saw that coming from a mile away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we definitely have some that are very far apart. Okay. So my number 15, I'm going with Pitch Black, mainly because this is the only one where like I feel like I genuinely can't remember much of the specifics at all. So I
Mhm.
just felt like naturally I just defaulted it to number 15. Number
Okay.
14 is Under Siege. Number 13 is Don't Breathe. Number 12 is Chronicle. So that's a really big split. Number 11 is Event Horizon. Number 10 is No Country for Old Men. Number 9 is RoboCop. Number 8 is Candyman. Number 7 is iRobot. Number 6 is Olympus Has Fallen. And then top 5, we got Mission Impossible 3, Bullet Train, The Invisible Man, Zodiac, and then The Town. So both of our like special picks became our number ones, which I think
It's
is
funny
fun.
too because you said you didn't think anything would beat Zodiac, and The Town did.
Yeah, and then that came out of nowhere.
The only one we actually had in common was Mission Impossible 3 at number 5. I'm actually surprised at how high you put No Country for Old Men, given how much you mentioned you didn't like it when we were talking about it earlier.
It was just a matter of liking other things less
Okay.
and it being a more objectively good movie than the other ones that I feel like I still could get some level of enjoyment because like I didn't dislike it. Like I was ranking these on Letterboxd
Hmm.
and I gave it like a 3.5, which was probably a little over generous, but it's not bad. I wouldn't mind rewatching it. Some of those ones at the bottom, I just wouldn't have to rewatching.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, our largest one was Chronicle with a 10 level difference. I assumed to be Zodiac, but that one only had an 8 level difference. So that one is
What
definitely
was the Invisible
interesting.
Man difference?
You said Invisible Man was 3.
Yes.
Okay, that one's also a 10. So technically,
Okay,
Chronicle and Invisible Man are tied.
there you go.
Okay, interesting. The more and more we do these, I think it really just lets the audience know how different we are in the types of movies we like.
100%.
All right, well, this was fun. We will do this again soon.